In 1861, the American Civil War broke out. This wasn't just an internal affair, it was the biggest news shock worldwide. So, how did the rest of the world react? And did they have any plans to intervene in this conflict? You should know that at the time, the USA wasn't considered a leading world power. It was merely a nation with potential. The US couldn't rank equally with Europe's great empires, not even with the Austrian Empire. Many European leaders saw the war in America as just a trivial matter. A sideshow, compared to what was happening on their continent. For example, the wars for independence in Italy, or the incident where Denmark provoked Prussia. Europe was the true center of the drama. All the major powers sent observers to the US to monitor and learn new military tactics and technologies. However, to be honest, they weren't overly impressed with the quality of warfare demonstrated by either side. Starting with the southern neighbor, Mexico, their initial reaction was complete silence. Mexico had just finished its own civil war, and relations with the US were already poor after the previous war. But Mexico didn't have time to worry about the US for long. Because in late 1861, French forces unexpectedly invaded. So, during the entire American Civil War, Mexico was preoccupied with dealing with its own major domestic problems. Up north, Canada was a British colony, so all foreign policy decisions were made in London. Nevertheless, the Canadian people were clear. They enthusiastically sided with the Union, the North. Thousands of Canadian volunteers crossed the border to join and fight for the Union cause against the Confederacy. For Great Britain, the war was an unexpected and troubling issue that disrupted its foreign policy. The reason was that Britain imported a huge amount of cotton from the Confederate States, the South. Many British industries depended on this raw material, so they wanted the war to end quickly for economic reasons. However, Britain didn't necessarily need the Union to win. British shipyards even built warships for the Confederate States. The Confederacy hoped Britain would grant them diplomatic recognition, which would strengthen their position and pull in France. But Britain never did. They feared that recognizing the South would anger the US and provoke an invasion of Canada. War was too expensive, and furthermore, the overwhelming majority of the British public supported the Union. This support intensified greatly when the war's main purpose shifted towards the abolition of slavery. Many thousands of people living in the British Isles, especially the Irish, volunteered to go to the US and fight for the Union's ideals. In summary, the Confederacy received very little valuable, official help from Great Britain. As for France, their reaction was similar to Austria's. The conflict was an excellent and welcome opportunity for their interests. It allowed France and Austria to intervene in Mexico to place Maximilian Habsburg on the throne, extending their influence in the New World. The dual goal was to increase influence and simultaneously recoup debts that Mexico had refused to pay to European creditors. Both nations had unofficial contact with the Confederacy regarding mutual recognition. Yet, neither France nor Austria ultimately recognized the South, as they knew it would certainly lead to war with the United States. Prussia, later part of Germany, wasn't shocked, but saw the war as a strategic opportunity to advance its own goals. Though they criticized the military skills, Prussia clearly favored the Union, the North. Prussia, despite being a conservative state, knew that acting against the Union would damage its public image, especially among the German-speaking population, where many strongly supported the Union and the cause of abolition. Prussia was aiming for German unification, so presenting itself as an ally of the Union helped them gain political points. This strategy allowed Prussia to improve its public image in the German world easily and effectively. And Russia, US leadership was relieved when a large Russian naval fleet appeared off their coast. They hoped the Russian fleet would help them enforce the blockade of the Confederate coast. But the surprising truth is, the fleet wasn't there to help the US, but to avoid being trapped in the Baltic Sea. Russia deployed the fleet to the US in anticipation of a potential war with Britain, as tensions were running extremely high at the time. Relations between Russia and Britain were, at that moment, extremely strained. Nevertheless, Tsar Alexander II was a public and vocal ally of President Lincoln. He strongly advocated for a complete Union victory and the total destruction of the Confederacy. Finally, the Ottoman Empire, they stood firmly with the Union. They quickly signed a significant trade deal with the Union. Furthermore, they strictly banned Confederate ships from entering the Empire's waters. And the best part, the Ottomans made a massive amount of money from this war. They were the second largest supplier of cotton to the European market. With their main competitor, the South, blockaded, the Ottomans easily dominated the market and made a fortune. In summary, the world's reaction was initial surprise, followed by a practical question: how can we profit from this situation?